This is a tutorial which is an answer to one of my subscribers' questions. He wanted me to figure out how to do a little bit of a practical reason to use Arc. And one of the practical reasons that I'd like to use Arc for is to have an animated, sort of like a little, I don't know, a percentage meter or a speed meter. You can kind of do any of this stuff here. So as you can see here, this is an arc, and it's in an SVG arcs, which means that no matter how big you make it or how small you make it, it's still going to be nice and crisp. We're going to learn how to make this arc and how to make this line here work. You obviously can have an option to make this an animated thing that comes up as soon as somebody scrolls down, or I mean, there's a bazillion ways to really make this work, but I'm just going to show you the basics so that you can build this and then you can manipulate it any kind of way you would like. Okay, so the first step is, let's just go ahead and draw what we need to draw. We're going to go step by step into all the sections here. So let's go ahead and create our SVG. So here's my starter SVG. And again, if you don't know, CodePen allows you to create little snippets. It's really cool how it works. You just go to your account here, and you go to settings. And then right here, you have your little emit snippets. So for example, if I type in SVG, an entire SVG comes out right here. So there's a way to draw this. Basically, you just create your little opening bracket and you put exactly what you want in here. Okay, so that's basically how it works. I've created something for HTML. You can create something for your CSS, and I think that's pretty about it. I don't think you can create one for the JavaScript. But let's go back to what we were doing. Okay, so here's our SVG. Oops, tab. And let's bring this down. Okay, so just to make this easier and to show anybody who's actually, this is your first time coming here, we're going to create a little graph in order to show how everything works. So let's go ahead and grab this graph here. Okay, so as you can see, this is just a simple grid. Excuse me. This is just a simple grid that will allow us to be able to follow along with what's going on, okay? Then after that, we're just going to have some points on the grid. And these points will just show 50-50, which is the dead center of the graph, and then a radius of 2. In other words, a radius that goes out, excuse me, a radius of 20. A radius that goes out 10, 20 in one direction, 10, 20 in the other direction, okay? So the next thing we need to do is create an arc, okay? So if you don't remember how to create an arc, let's just go ahead and make one here. So we're going to give this arc an ID of arc, real simple. And then we're going to create our arc here. So we're going to put our arc at, we're going to give the starting point of 30, 50. Okay, that just brings my point to 30 and then down 50, which is right here. Okay, and then the arc code is A. Since we're going to make this a not a relative code, but a precise code, then, or a literal code, we're going to use capital letters. And so the first two numbers are the radius. The next number is the rotation of your arc. The next two numbers are what side of the arc. So in other words, are we going to show the top side of the arc or the bottom side of the arc? And then if are we going to show the bottom top of the arc on the bottom, or are we going to show the bottom top part of the arc on the top? And again, if you want specifics on all this, I have another video that shows how the arcs work. Okay, And then the next part is where it's going to end. And we're going to end on X is 70, 50. Or let's see, yeah, 50, 50, 60, 70, 50. So 70, 50. Okay. And so that we can see the arc, let's give it a stroke and a stroke width. Okay. So the default is 1, but I just want to put it in there. We're going to use that later. So here's our arc, and our arc really doesn't have any information because we didn't put any. So now we already know that the arcs, since we're going to use a circle for our drawing, we're going to make our arc actually be half of a circle. So to make half of a circle, we're going to make the radius 20. Okay. So let's go ahead and make the radius 20 by 20. And as you can see, there has a default fill, and it comes below here. Okay. So let's go ahead and change our fill to none. Okay. And again, if we want it to be on the top, let's put it on the top by making this a 1. And now it's the top part of the arc. Okay. So then, excuse me. After that, we're going to create a text. Again, this is a default text just to kind of get my letters all set up. And we want this to be 0%. And we can change this font to anything we want. And well, we'll do that in the CSS. Well, let's just go ahead and do that in the CSS. Okay. Now, in order to manipulate all this, I want to be able to check to see how everything's going. So instead of having to refresh this over and over and over again as we add code, let's create a slider so that as we animate our code, we can just kind of experiment with the slider. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and create an input. Let's name this input range. Make it a range. Okay. And let's make the value start off with 0. Let's do a minimum of 0 and a max. So we won't know what the max is quite yet because we don't know how far to go here. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. Then we're going to make another input and call that number. Okay. And just if you didn't know, what makes this number is that we can actually go up and down like this, and it only will bring in numbers. Okay. Let's start with an initial value of 0. Again, let's make a minimum to match what our range is going to be, and our max, we won't know that yet until we figure out how long this is. Okay. So that's pretty much it for our HTML. I won't bore you with the styling quite yet. What we're going to do next is create all our variables for our ranger here. So we're going to have several variables. The first variable is going to be our range. Okay. And then we're going to also do our number. Okay. So that takes care of the range and the number. And then we're going to also get our arc. Okay, so now we're focusing on the range, we're focusing on the number, and we're focusing on the arc. And then we're going to do our length. So what we want is we want to know what this path is right here. We want to make sure we know what this path is. So the length is actually going to be in a div. We're going to put it in a div so that we can see what our length is. So let's go ahead and put that in a div. Call this arc length. Okay, just so that we can see how long this is. So our length is going to be document, query selector, and we're going to say arc length. Okay, just so we can figure out what our length is, okay? So now that we have those few things, let's go ahead and put our length right here. So we're going to say that length, which is our arc length. So length, inner HTML. Let's make sure we typed everything right. So let's just put here hello. And it works. So let's make sure that this is the arc get total length. And that's a function. And as you can see, this is what this entire length is. With this information, and we're gonna raise it to 63 just to be safe. But as you can see, this information here tells me how long this path is. So now with this information, we can do a lot of damage. So let's go ahead and go to the arc. So we're gonna say arc. So the stroke dash array is going to be 63, and the stroke dash offset is also going to be 63. And so now we have no stroke here. Okay, so as you already may or may not know, what we can do is we can make the stroke appear by manipulating this. Okay, so for example, if this is 20, then we have this much. If this is 10, then we have that much. So if we have 0, we have all of it. But notice this is what I have to do. I have to constantly type it. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do here is now I'm going to manipulate this offset with this slider right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we're going to do is that when we say our input, which is our range input, so this is saying that when I change the input of the range, we're going to create a function. Okay, so now we have our function, and the first thing I want to do right now is I want this to be the same as this. Okay, so that we're going to say that the value of our number, so number value, will equal this, and this refers to whatever the function is referring to, and in this case it's the range, so it's going to be the range's value. Okay, so whatever the number, whatever range input I put in will be what the number value is going to be. So that's exactly right. And since it defaults to 0 to 100, that's why it's going to 100. Okay, but we don't want it to be to 100. What we want it to be is to whatever this is, which is 63. Okay, so in order to do that, we have to make this max here 63 and this max 63. You see how important this number is now? See, it affects everything. So now when we do this, we go to 63. Now, the next part is going to be, I want this to manipulate my stroke dash offset. Okay, so that will mean that as I input this, the arc style, the actual stroke dash offset. Now, JavaScript does not recognize hyphens, so you have to use camel case wherever you have hyphens in your, where you would normally have hyphens in your CSS or in your HTML. Okay, so stroke dash offset will equal this value. Okay, so let's try that out. And as you can see, it works pretty good here. Okay, now the only issue now is that I want this to go from left to right, and I want this to kind of move with the same, I want this to go the opposite direction. See, it's going in the wrong direction. But see, there's two ways to do this. You can say that your range is going to be direction right to left instead of left to right. And now it does it. But what it also does is it makes your bigger number on the left and your smaller number on the right. We're close, but that's not exactly what I want. I still want this to show the bigger number on the right. So let's not do this. So let's erase this. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. So my only other option is to flip this, flip the actual arc. So let's flip the actual arc. To do that, here's our arc. To do that, to flip anything, as a matter of fact, we can just do scale -1, and that actually flips it over. Okay, so let's go ahead and do transform, scale, and we only want to scale it on the x-axis because otherwise it's going to flip it this way too. So scale x -1. It might help if I spelled it correctly. Okay, now here's the problem. Where did my arc go? If you do it this way, the only problem is going to be is that it will actually scale it along the 0 axis here. Okay, so actually my arc is over here somewhere out of the viewport. So in order to fix this, we're going to change our transform origin. And it's pretty simple here because we want our transform origin to be right dead center. So our transform origin is going to be 50 pixels, 50 pixels, and it'll put it in the center. Okay, to 30 pixels on the x-axis, and it's going to push it over. Okay, so 50 pixels. Now we don't even need this y here because obviously we're not manipulating the y. But just for force of habit, I always put x and y. Okay, so now we have exactly what we want. Almost. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I want this to be the opposite way. I want this to grow blue instead of grow like this. Okay, so here's a little tip. What we're going to do is we're going to create another arc, same exact arc. I'm going to copy this, but we're going to put it behind it. Okay, and we're going to call this white arc, just to name it something. So we're going to name this the white arc. We're still manipulating the arc. So but now we don't see anything because it's blue behind it also. So actually, let's call this blue arc. Okay. So now what we can do here is we could make this background one blue and this front one white. And now what happens is we have a white arc. And now when we erase the white arc, it looks like the blue is growing. You see? Now we do have a little bit of a halo here. That's easily fixed by changing our stroke width to something smaller. So like 0.7, for example. Okay. We also have to change this arc here, this blue arc. Actually, we could change so that we can make sure that this starts out at 0. Okay. And now we have a growing arc here. Let's make this a little thicker. How about 0.85? Yeah, that works. Okay, so there's our arc. Okay, and that's pretty much it if that's all you need. But for the rest of us who want to be able to manipulate this, it's the same idea. all you want to do here is when we change our on input range, we want, what do we want? We want the number, no, not the number, the text. Where's the text? We don't have anything for text. So let's go ahead and create an ID for this. And let's call this percentage. Okay. Or just call it percent. Easy to type. Our percent. So let's go ahead and create one of these for percent. Okay. So now we could say that percent inner HTML equals, and let's make sure that we got this working correctly. Okay, so that works. So when we change this, it's going to be this value. Okay, so that works perfectly. And then we're going to say this value plus percent sign. And concatenate the percent sign, and now we have that. But our last thing is a simple math situation where we want this, instead of being 63, we want this to be a percent, like 100%. Okay. So in order to do that, we're going to say this value times 100 divided by 63, because 63 is the total amount. Okay. So, now here's our problem. Oh my gosh, this is such a huge number, because obviously we need to estimate it. So we're going to wrap this whole thing behind math floor. Okay, so now we got math floor, and there we have it, all the way up to 100%. Now here's an issue. If I go over like this, you see how it kind of skips. Okay, in order to fix that, what we're going to do is we're going to change our amounts here to still be 100. Okay, so that we can get exact numbers here. So to do that, we're going to change our steps in our input here. Let's see, our ranger. So we're going to say our steps is divisible by 63. So 0.63. There we go. And now we have full numbers here. And something's wrong with my math floor here. Okay, very good. So now we have exact numbers as I go left and right on my number line here. 100% down to 0%. And that's pretty much it. And if you wanted to get this little fader here, all you have to do is also add, for example, I can make the arc style fill opacity will equal this value divided by 63. That way, when it gets to 63, it'll be 63 over 63, which is 1, and everything else will be a decimal point of it. So let's create a fill of this, of blue, and fill opacity will equal 0 for now. And that should work now. There you go. So that part's working perfectly. So now the only thing left is to manipulate our numbers here. So let's go ahead and manipulate the numbers. So the number was percent. So percent font size, let's call it I don't know, 0.5 EM. That'll work. And then we'll change where our Y value is. to maybe 40%. Let's see. A little too high. 45. That works. Let's split the difference. 42.5. I like that. So now when we manipulate this, it goes to there. Very good. And then finally, if we want to change this for readability's sake, you can do the same thing with the fill opacity. Or what I did was I just put an if statement that said that if I, so I had to create a new, well, let's just go ahead and do that while I'm explaining it. So let's create a new variable called I and make it equal to 0. Okay. And so then we say here that if we have to create an if else statement. Okay. So we say if I is greater than 50, then we do something. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that the percent style fill will equal white, else percent style fill equals black. Okay, very good. All right, let's make it blue. Let's go. I don't know. Let's go back to black. Back to black. Now we need to update this I. So to do that, we just say that I equals this value. That's all we have to do. Well, actually, this I will equal this part. Copy, paste. Okay. Why do we have this? Because this actually goes all the way up to 100. This value only goes up to 63. Okay. So now we have this, and when it gets to 50, it'll change to white. And there we have it. So now all I did to make this look pretty, you can kind of do all the same thing except remove your grid. And now you have a nice looking, I don't know, speed counter or percentage counter. And like I said before, you can make this as big as you want and to manipulate it. Actually, let's put this above it so that no matter how big we make it, okay, actually we probably don't even need one of these. Okay. So we can erase this. Okay. So we can get it this big and still manipulate it. And it looks pretty good. So if you have any questions, let me know. Have a beautiful day. Don't forget to subscribe for other tutorials like this. Don't forget to comment if you have a question on how this was done or if you need some other information. Have a beautiful day.